after all these years. Oh, I should probably show this before I. Here we go. Empowering democracy. And the title of this one is We Need a People's Fed. I mean, we need a People's Fed. Anyway, this is episode 25. And this is about an article I saw in Common Dreams. Oh, by the way, I'm Joe Firestone, your host, in case you don't know. So, I'm going to share with you a post that I found in Common Dreams that I thought really deserved some additional words. So, I'm going to share the screen. The title of this is Not Normal. There's James Bullard, President of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, speaks during an interview in Washington, D.C. on August 6, 2019, before the pandemic. Quote, "This is not normal," unquote. The Fed president spoke at a private Wall Street forum. Amid charges of a, quote, culture of corruption, the St. Louis Fed released a transcript and said that, quote, "We are listening to the commentary around this and will think differently about this in the future," unquote. This was written by Jessica Corbett on October 20th, 2022. James Bullard, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, came under fire Thursday after the New York Times revealed that, quote, he spoke last Friday at an off-the-record, invitation-only forum led by Citigroup and open to clients, unquote. Just a little point. I wonder what his fee was. Is that public information? I don't know. As Times reporter Gianna Smialek summarized, hang on a second, let me see that. This is going. Yes, it is going. Good. Going good. As Times reporter Gianna Smialek summarized in a series of tweets about her reporting, quote, was this against Fed rules? Unclear, though we go through them in the story. Bad look? Definitely, a range of people said, unquote. Quote again, I wanted to get a sense of whether this kind of private, off-record event with bank clients happens a lot, and I just don't hear about it, so I called around, Smialek explained. The overwhelming answer? No, unquote. Narayana Kocherlakota, a former president of the Federal Reserve Bank, of Minneapolis, told her that, quote, this is not normal, unquote, and with Citi's clients involved, quote, the optics are terrible. Brookings Institution senior fellow Norm Eisen similarly said that at first glance, quote, it's not an ethics violation, but it's not a great look, unquote. A tweet, which I guess was from Eisen, it was in the Fed Up campaign anyway, said, this is more than just a bad look, it's a big problem. How is the public supposed to take seriously the idea that the Fed, a private public institution that walks and talks like a private bank, is focused on their interests when it's holding private briefings for the big banks? The president of the St. Louis Fed spoke at a closed press, off-record, invite-only event that Citi hosted and asked its clients to. Is this against Fed rules? Unclear. Though we go through them in the story. Bad look? Definitely, a range of people said. This was on October 20th that this tweet was done. The report explains that while the Fed's rules don't bar Bullard from attending such events, comments shared behind closed doors should align with previous public statements, and central bankers should, quote, not provide any profit-making person or organization with a prestige advantage over its competitors, unquote. Jeff Hauser of the watchdog group, the Revolving Door Project, told Smialik that, quote, Citi is flexing here, unquote, showing clients that it can provide, quote, privileged access, unquote, to people like a Bullard. Quote again, there are few better sources of information on the planet than a member of the Federal Open Market Committee, unquote, he said. Quote again, their every utterance is treated as potentially market moving, unquote. In a tweet about the reporting, Hauser took aim at Fed Chair Jerome Powell, saying, quote, that ongoing indications of ethical lapses continue apace underscores the project's view that Powell cannot reform the Federal Reserve, unquote. Indeed, he cannot even reform himself, obviously. And Sean Tuffy, Tuffy, whose Twitter handle is at SM Tuffy, said LMAO, we all know what that means. What kind of shop is Powell running? The president of the St. Louis Fed spoke at a closed press, off-record, invite-only event that Citi hosted and asked its clients to. Is against Fed rules? Unclear, though we go through them in the story. Bad look? Definitely, a range of people said. Sean Tuffy said, if you're keeping score at home, in the last week we've had one Fed governor admit he broke the trading rules because, quote, he didn't understand them, unquote, and another speak at a bank's private client event. U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Democrat of Massachusetts, who chairs the Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, an economic policy panel, and has been a high-profile critic of the Fed's recent interest rate hikes, also called out Powell on Thursday and highlighted that the Bullard revelation follows a recent scandal involving another central banker. In the midst of a stock trading scandal, now we learn that Bullard was secretly spilling his views on the economy to Citi and their clients, unquote, Warren said. And quote again, Fed officials are making a mockery of ethics, and Chair Powell is failing to overhaul a culture of corruption. And according to Smialek, quote, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis called the discussion informal and said Mr. Bullard had participated in the event in the past. It also noted that he had given an interview to Reuters earlier in the day with remarks similar to those he made at the Citi event and appeared at other forums in Washington on Friday and Saturday. As a result, they said the public had access to his views. The exact same views, the exact same words, but a person who attended the speech, who spoke on condition of anonymity, because the forum was meant to be off the record, said Mr. Bullard, had also suggested during his comments that based on the historical record, the market gyrations in response to the Fed's moves had been less pronounced than might have been expected, given how much rates have increased. No such comments were included in the Reuters article. After the Times published its report, the St. Louis Fed on Thursday released a lengthy statement about the controversy and an official and unofficial transcript of Bullard's remarks from the event, which shows he spoke about the market reaction. Quote, Jim Bullard works hard to maintain the spirit of transparency and active communications to make his views widely known. He shared his views with the media before and after the event and covered similar ground in other recent public remarks, unquote. The bank said, adding that, quote again, we are listening to the commentary around this and will think differently about this in the future, unquote. End of article. Of course, that was off base. That was a violation of the Fed's rules. It should never have been done. It should never have been done. You're not supposed to give an advantage of Fed views to one party in the public without doing the same thing for other parts of the public. All should be equal according to the Fed rules. So, Jay Powell, the chairperson of the Fed, has violated Fed rules and continues to violate Fed rules. Since this is a situation where the policies of the Fed are specifically targeting the wages of workers, the intention of Fed policy being to slow the growth of the wages, of workers. Since that is the case, since that bias is the case, and since the Fed has a dual mandate to seek full employment and price stability, it seems that the Fed, with meetings like this and with the monetary policy it is following, is violating the dual mandate, it should not just be fighting inflation by implementing a monetary policy that seeks to lower the growth of wages. Since that is its purpose, it is clearly in violation of the dual mandate, supporting one part of the dual mandate and choosing to fail in its duty to support the other part of the dual mandate. It cannot do that and uphold the dual mandate. By doing this, the Fed is violating the law, specifically the Humphrey-Hawkins Act, which established the dual mandate. There's no freedom to work against one part of the dual mandate at one point in time while working to try to reach the other part of the dual mandate. That's especially not true when the institution involved has spent all the years since 1980 at least working to achieve one part of the dual mandate, specifically price stability, while through most of those years it has paid no attention to the other part of the dual mandate, which is to support the achievement of full employment. The Fed has been violating the dual mandate for more than 40 years. For a short period of time, Jay Powell was working to support the full employment part of the dual mandate. But the first time there's any problem with prices going up, all of a sudden, the full employment part of the dual mandate is forgotten about. Even though for more than 40 years, the Fed has been working against the interests of wage earners and workers, constantly guarding the tendency of the economy to lose control of prices. There are many things the Fed can be doing and should be doing to moderate the inflationary tendencies of the economy. But it should not be doing things that work against full employment and higher wages for workers. It's got to find a way to end its bias towards the banksters. It's got to reconstitute itself so that it is always looking out for the interests of most of the people. The Fed supports the oligarchy. It is not a people's Fed. We need a people's Fed. We need one right now. We cannot wait until this policy crashes the economy and leaves large numbers of people, of unemployed people, in its wake. We have to say no. We have to say this is unacceptable. We will not be tolerating it anymore. This Fed has no independence. It always works for the interests of Wall Street, for the investors, for the moneyed classes. And never seeks to satisfy the interests of the working public. That has to stop. It has to stop now. In my view, Jerome Powell should resign immediately, and someone who will look after the interests of the people should be hired in its place. I can make two suggestions, but I won't. I don't want to ruin the chances of these two people after the unkind things I've said about Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. I'll leave it to others to suggest who should be the new head of the Fed. But I think there has to be a new head of the Fed now, because the Fed is putting all of us in a tremendous bind, and we cannot have any more of this. The Fed must stop raising interest rates immediately. There must be a new head of the Fed. That new head of the Fed should work with the Secretary of the Treasury to try to develop a law that would move the Fed into the Treasury Department, where it belongs. Why do I say it belongs in the Treasury Department? Because the Constitution provides for only three branches, of government. The Fed is performing an executive function, not a legislative function and not a judicial function. Therefore, it should be rolled into the executive branch and should not be independent of it. It should be taking orders from the Secretary of the Treasury. Well, let's see if you have any questions. Or comments. Here I am. Hi, Kay. Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, Dolores. And Jeff Denton says, he's probably right. He's normally right. Jeff says, it seems to me the economy was propped up with quantitative easing during the Trump administration. It was propped up with quantitative easing since, when did Ben Bernanke start it? late in 2009, early 2010, maybe before that. It was propped up with quantitative easing during the Trump administration, says Jeff. Although, of course, the pandemic saved Trump from the blame. Weird how nobody talked about it. Kay says, yes, Jeff, that is a big part of it. Quantitative easing predates the Trump administration by a long shot. It was being conducted by the Obama administration from the time he took office in 2009. Sandy said, hello, shared Kay. Is this another MMT live stream? Hi, Sandy. Yes, this is an MMT live stream. I'd say I'm not doing explicitly MMT live streams now. What I'm doing is lots of live streams. Some of them involve MMT, of course. This is one of those. It involves MMT, but it's still under empowering democracy, because obviously the idea of a people's Fed is certainly consistent with the MMT outlook. I wouldn't say all of the MMTers share my view. But I think that probably a good many of them share the view that the Fed is biased towards Wall Street in its policies, that it never tries to make things easier for working stiffs. I think that's been obvious for many, many years. Hi, Sandy. How you doing? But if you want to add any questions or make any comments concerning how MMT fits into this, I'll be happy to try to answer. Jeff says, yes, but my point is that nobody in the big club seemed to bring it up, especially the fact that the pandemic saved him from any blame going into the last year of his presidency. Yeah, that was true. It did save him from any blame because people were dissatisfied with quantitative easing. Eric Savchenko says the Phillips curve is used for policy at the Fed. That shows a bias against labor, doesn't it? Yes, Eric. It shows a bias against labor because the Phillips curve assumes a trade-off. It assumes the existence of a trade-off in the real world between full employment and inflation. And it assumes the existence of some non-accelerating interest rate, which balances full employment against inflation. Okay, the NAIRU. From the MMT point of view, there's no such thing as the NAIRU. The NAIRU is a myth. the fact that MMT, well, I won't say MMT is useless to us until the Fed confesses to it being true, because after all, we can still use MMT to understand what the Fed is doing, what other central banks are doing, what the policy of the we should we understand the implications of the policy the federal government is following by using the MMT lens. So MMT is not useless to us from the standpoint of understanding. It's not even useless to us from the standpoint of formulating some alternative policies which can help us. It's useful in all those ways. Okay, but MMT is not to blame for the Fed not confessing to MMT being true. I mean, that's the Fed's fault. It's not MMT's fault. Or to personalize this a little more, it's not the fault of Stephanie Kelton. It's not the fault of Warren Mosler. It's not the fault, okay, of Randy Wray. It's not the fault, okay, of Bill Mitchell. And it's not my fault that the Federal Reserve won't listen to any of us. Sorry, but that's the truth. We don't bear that responsibility. Kay says, we already know that, Joe. Okay, until they know, we're screwed. Well, they know a lot more than they're confessing. I think part of the problem of them actually using policies that fall out of the MMT lens is that those policies would not be biased towards Wall Street. And the Fed is in the business not of being independent, but of listening to Wall Street and to those who like to do the bidding of Wall Street, such as Larry Summers. So anyway, that's that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so if not, I'll point out this is my fourth stream today. There was some more I wanted to say, but I think that 4 streams are enough. And I'm looking forward to the weekend besides. So the other things I had to say, I think will wait until Monday morning. And that, okay, I'll see you then. I hope you like this new format of multiple streams during the day. I'm finding I kind of like it. Even though the streams are shorter. Anyway, I thank you all for coming. I thank you all for sharing. I thank you, Kay, for showing up for every stream, and also Dolores. And Sandy, I thank you for being coming to most of the streams. And so everybody, good night. And have a great weekend, but I may have a new comment here. If I do, I will certainly respond to it. Kay says, thank you, Joe. You're doing great. Love you all. I like it a lot better. Oh, good, good, because I like it somewhat better also. I don't know if I like it a lot better yet, but I find that I'm liking it more with each passing day. So it's growing on me for sure. I think it's growing on Bonnie also. It's got certain advantages. So good night, everybody, and thanks again for coming. Oh, I am supposed to remind everybody my Patreon account is there. If you like these streams, then please do contribute on the Patreon account. If you don't know how to make a single contribution using the Patreon account, then the Buy Me a Coffee account is there too. And that's at www.buymeacoffee.com/Joe Firestone. So that works too. So there it is. Once again, thank you. And I'm going to look for you Monday morning. Thanks again.